Hello friends, today's video is specifically for Seventh-day Adventists like myself. Others are welcome, of course, to listen in, though they probably won't have the context to really grasp what we're talking about here. In relation to recent events, there's been quite a bit of discussion online amongst Seventh-day Adventists through social media, etc., regarding country living and end-time events and when is the right time to prepare and to leave the cities. And so I wanted to share a few thoughts on that today. I'm hoping to break this up into quite a number of videos, meaning that typically I would just speak of 1 to 3 Ellen White quotations during each of these videos. So it kind of boggles my mind that there is any confusion on this matter, especially since that God gave us prophetically a message where everything was spelled out in, common English. And so I don't understand why there is still confusion on this matter. So I'm hoping over the next days and weeks to start a conversation regarding some of these quotations and what God has asked us to do at this time. So we're going to start today with a quotation from the book Adventist Home. This quotation was written by Ellen White in the year 1903. So that is a long, long time ago. And Ellen White wrote that, quote, "The time has come when, as God opens the way, families should move out of the cities. The children should be taken into the country. The parents should get as suitable a place as their means will allow. Though the dwelling may be small, yet there should be land in connection with it that may be cultivated." Now notice in this quotation, one of the key things I'd like to bring out is that the time had already come in 1903. There was no waiting for events of prophetic significance to transpire. The message was out of the cities. This one is dated 1904, and this comes from Country Living, page 9. "Again and again, the Lord has instructed that our people are to take their families away from the cities into the country." Now, let me ask you a question. Why would God have to instruct his people again and again? Because they're not learning, they're not listening. So God is sending the message again and again. What are they to do? To take their families away from the cities and into where? Into the country. And what are they going to do there? Among other things, quote, "where they can raise their own provisions." Why? "For in the future, the problem of buying and selling will be a very serious one." Okay? We're talking about the mark of the beast crisis. We're talking about a preparation where we can be independent for the necessities of life and not be dependent upon the system and not be in a position where we can be coerced and forced to go against our conscience, our religious liberty. Now, what does she say in the next sentence? "We should now," 1904, "begin to heed the instruction given us over and over again." Ellen White is emphasizing something there, and what she's emphasizing is that God's people have not taken action. Next sentence, "get out of the cities into rural districts where the houses are not crowded closely together and where you will be free from the interference of enemies." So there's a lot of valuable insight in here. And one of the many reasons why we're to be out of the cities and into the rural districts, not only till we grow our own provisions, have our own food, our own water, our own power, and be independent, but in addition to that, we are to be free from the interference of our enemies. In other words, by being independent and not having people right on the property line next to us with the houses right close together, where people can be spying and reporting on your actions. We are to be free, place ourselves, we'll be free from the interference of our enemies. Let's consider the next quotation in Second Selected Messages, page 354. This is chapter 45, called A Call to Country Living. And keep in mind that these are just a few of so many quotations that we'll be discussing more in the future. Ellen White says something very stirring here. She says, "I could not sleep past 2 o'clock this morning. What was keeping the prophet awake? What was it that was prohibiting her from her sleep? During the night season, I was in counsel. I was pleading with some families to avail themselves of God's appointed means and get away from the cities to save their children." Now, this is another one of the reasons why God has given us the country living message, and that is to save our children from the wicked influence of those who do not honor and respect God. That is just one of the many reasons. So what did she see? She was pleading with people, families, to avail themselves of God's appointed means and to get away from the cities to save their children. What were they doing? What did she see them doing? What did the prophet of God see God's remnant people doing? Some were loitering, making no determined efforts. And of course, unfortunately, I'd have to say that most likely the same would be said of today. There are some people in God's remnant church who are loitering and they're making no determined efforts. There are some people out there who are saying, "I'm going to wait for this crisis to arise, the Sunday law crisis, the mark of the beast crisis, and then I will act." There are others out there who are saying, "I'd be willing to go as soon as God miraculously opens the way and takes care of everything I need, and there are no obstacles in my path." Friends, I'm going to tell you something. That time will never come. So listen to this. Some were loitering, making no determined efforts. Notice what the prophet brings us back to, the story of Lot fleeing from Sodom. The angels of mercy hurried Lot and his wife and daughters by taking hold of their hands. Had Lot hastened as the Lord desired him to? What did the Lord desire of Lot? He wanted him to hasten to action and to obey the call to get out of Sodom. But had Lot hastened as the Lord desired him to, his wife would not have become a pillar of salt. Lot had too much of a lingering spirit. Let us not be like him. Friends, some of us need to heed the warning found in the story of Lot and his example. Now listen to this. Ellen White now makes the connection between Lot and between us today. The same voice that warned Lot to leave Sodom bids us, the voice of God which was sent through the angel messengers to Lot, is that same voice of God speaking to us today. And what does he say to us? Quote, "Come out from among them and be ye separate, and touch not the unclean." 2 Corinthians 6:17. Did you ever see that verse in light of the country living message? God calls us to separate from the wickedness in the cities. Judgments are coming. Destruction is coming to the cities. Pandemics are coming. Lots of things are coming to the cities, and God wants to protect his people. And he says, "Come out from among them and be ye separate." Those who obey this warning will find a refuge. Let every man be wide awake for himself and try to save his family. Let him gird himself for the work. What does that mean? Prepare yourself for the work at hand, for the work of the salvation of your family. not only spiritually, but also physically. Let him gird himself for the work. God will reveal from point to point what to do next. My friends, God has sent us a message, and we must respond to that message. And when we do so, and we say, Lord, I am willing to heed your instruction, I am willing to go, God tells us here through his messenger that he will then reveal from point to point what to do next. Don't expect God to reveal anything if you haven't made a decision to obey and follow the instruction he's given you. In the next paragraph, Ellen White says, hear the voice of God through the Apostle Paul. Quote, work out your own salvation with fear and trembling. Now I want to bring our attention to something here. Faith motivates us to, or brings us to action. There is no such thing as faith without action. When God sent Noah a message and he said, I want you to prepare your family and prepare an ark for the saving of your family. What did Noah do? He didn't say, yes, Lord, and then sit down just to read his Bible. He got up, got his hammer and saw, cut down some trees, and began to follow the blueprint God had laid out on how to build that boat for the saving of his family. So the message of the Apostle Paul says, work out your own salvation with fear and trembling, for it is God which worketh in you both to will and to do of his good pleasure. Now, Ellen White brings us back to Lot, and she, with a warning, a word of warning. Lot trod the plain, meaning he walked the valley with unwilling and tardy steps. Now here's the reality, is that many of us don't want to follow God's instruction. We want to remain in the city, and will come up with any number of excuses. Most of us, or many of us, have not done anything remotely related to evangelism for quite some time, and yet we're going to say, when someone brings up the message of country living, that we should be out of the city, we're going to bring up the message and say, well, I'm here because who else is going to warn the people? I've got to be in the city in order to evangelize. Never mind the fact that you weren't doing any evangelism, that you hadn't done any in years, but you're going to come up with excuses like this. We'll talk about that more in another video. God's plan, of course, always has been, and has been plainly stated as, that God's people should live outside in the rural areas, and that we should then commute into the cities for any kind of evangelistic effort or door-to-door work or any kind of missionary effort that he has for us. The only thing that Seventh-day Adventists were supposed to ever have in the city was to be churches. So Ellen White says, Lot trod the plain with unwilling and tardy steps. He had so long associated with evil workers that he could not see his peril. Many of us are saying, what's the big deal? I don't see why I should get my family out of the city. Lot didn't see it either. He lost his entire family. He lost children inside the city who wouldn't heed the warning to get out. He lost his wife, who looked back because her heart remained there and she was unwilling to go. He lost his 2 other daughters that went with him through the corruption of years of influence by the wicked surroundings in Sodom. And you know what the Bible tells us happened with them following their escape. Lot, the Bible tells us, despite all of his failings, was a righteous man. He wanted to do what's right, but he made some stupid and bad decisions, and instead of him winning the city over for Christ, he ended up not only winning nobody over, the whole city was destroyed, every person, but he ended up losing all his family in the meantime. That is what you call a terrible failure. So Lot had so long associated with the evil workers that he could not see his peril, until his wife stood on the plain as a pillar of salt forever. Friends, may God help us all as we consider the message that God has given to us. We understand better than others what events are coming upon the earth and what preparation we need to be able to help them, to help ourselves and to help those in need, whether it be through medical efforts, whether it be through evangelistic efforts. God has a divine blueprint that we are to follow. And part of that is for us to get ourselves and our families out of the city. I hope that these current events will serve as a wake-up call for God's people. In the coming days and weeks, we'll examine some more of Ellen White's writings on the subject, answer some of your questions that you put down below in the comments. God bless you, friends, and may we all pray for God to open up the way for those of us who have lingered up to this point.